Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of The Lindsay Elmore Show. Have you ever felt that you just were carrying around a burden that you no longer needed to carry? I think we all have, because we all are plagued at some point in our lives by negative emotions. We are all put into a space where we think that we are not good enough, unworthy, fearful, frustrated, where we have anger or lack empathy. We all go through the entire range of human emotions. That's what makes us human. But sometimes when we carry around all of this toxicity, it leads us to a point where we no longer feel like ourselves, where we feel that we are out of our bodies and we're unable to settle into a space of peace, a space of quiet, and a space of what I know to be the godliness, the goodness in me. In today's episode, I interview David Sandstrom. He is a naturopathic doctor and biblical health coach about how not dealing with our negative emotions can lead us to live extremely toxic lives. Let's get to the show. Welcome to The Lindsay Elmore Show, a podcast for people who deserve to be healthy, with honest, open, and enlightening conversations with doctors, thought leaders, creatives, and spiritual gurus. You'll walk away with simple and tangible tips and tricks that allow you to live your healthiest life so you can pursue your dreams, overcome obstacles, and leave your mark. Today on the show, we have David Sandstrom. David is a naturopathic doctor and a biblical health coach. He is the author of The Christian's Guide to Holistic Health, and he is also the host of the Holistic Health Matters podcast, where you can hear me as a guest. He also has an MBA and is an airline captain. And today, he and I talk about how toxic emotions become poisonous to us and can derail all of our positive efforts to live our healthiest life. David is an expert in the mind-body connection, and we start our conversation with the power of forgiveness. Dr. David Sandstrom, welcome to the Lindsay Elmore Show.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate you asking me on.
I am so excited to chat with you today because you and I both understand that total health cannot fully be present without some sort of journey through our emotions. And you teach people how to process health through their spirit, through their mind, through their body. And I wanted to start our conversation today with the concept of forgiveness, because bad things happen in all of our lives. We make mistakes. Other people hurt us. Series of circumstances happen around us that lead us to have those regrets and the guilt and carry it and allow it just to ruminate. And you maintain that forgiveness is an absolutely critical part of health and well-being. Start us out today and just tell us why.
Sure. If we're going to be in relationships, forgiveness is going to be a part of our everyday thing. I love the way John Eldredge puts it in his book called Waking the Dead. He says, living in community is like a bunch of porcupines on a cold night. We need to stick together to help keep warm, but as soon as we get close, we poke each other with our spines. So we're going to hurt one another. We're imperfect beings, And we need to exercise the skill, the practice of forgiveness if we really want to maximize our health potential. It's my contention that we maximize our health potential when we align our lives more fully with God's design for spirit, mind, and body. And forgiveness is firmly planted in the spiritual component as well as the mental emotional component. So because without practicing this and doing it well, we might hold on to some toxic feelings like resentment, bitterness, anger, rage, hatred. And we don't call those toxic emotions for nothing. They will impact our health. There's a relationship there between our mental, emotional, spiritual, and the physical. So what we want to do is, it's important when we're talking about forgiveness, it's important to understand the concept of an emotional cup. And the concept is this: every one of us has a limited capacity to handle our emotions. And when our cup is filled up with troubling emotions like resentment, fear, anxiety, there's not a lot of room in there for positive stuff. And when we get pushed, our cup spills over. It's like you're at a party, you're holding the red party cup with something, some punch in it, and someone knocks into you, something's going to spill out the top. Well, in a relational context, that stuff that spills out the top is the stuff that messes with our relationships. Maybe it's biting sarcasm. Maybe it's some type of passive aggressive behavior, or maybe it's stonewalling. These are the kinds of things that we find ourselves in the counselor's office over. But the real problem is those are the symptoms. The real problem is we have a full emotional cup. So what we want to do is empty our cup, and the symptoms will go away on their own. Jesus was asked, when he was talking about adultery, he said, "You've heard it said that you should not commit adultery. But I tell you, if a man looks at a woman lustfully, he's already committed adultery with her in his heart." So he internalized it, and he said, take care of the lust, and the adultery will go away on its own. So in the same way, when we take care of our emotional cup, we start to drain that thing with all those negative emotions that we hold on to from unforgiveness. We will have more capacity to enjoy positive emotions, which are, of course, health promoting. So getting into forgiveness. So forgiveness is a supernatural act. We don't naturally want to give up our right to retaliate. We don't find it in nature. The forest fire doesn't, the forest doesn't forgive the lightning for starting the fire. The gazelle doesn't forgive the lion for devouring its young. It's not natural in nature. It's a supernatural act. But withholding forgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And that's what we do when we don't get this right. So I like this metaphor. Forgiveness is kind of like crossing monkey bars. Remember, we all should play on monkey bars when we were in grade school. You'd grab a hold of one, and then you'd reach out and grab one as far ahead as you could. But in order to move forward, you have to let go of that bar behind so that you can reach forward to the one in front of you. The same is true with forgiveness. If we're holding on to what's happened to us in the past, we're not going to be able to move forward in a productive way. Another great quote is one from Mark Twain. "Forgiveness is the fragrance the rose gives off to the heel that crushed it." I really like that one. So when we practice regular confession and forgiveness, we empty our emotional cup and we watch the symptoms go away. So unforgiveness is a big part of pursuing health by nurturing our spirit. God takes forgiveness very seriously. It's in the Lord's Prayer. In Matthew chapter 6, we see, "And forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors." So why is God so serious about forgiveness? Because it hurts the ones he loves. He wants what's best for us. And he wants health for us. He wants positive outcomes. He wants to bless us. And he knows that holding on to this bitterness that comes along with unforgiveness will destroy our health. So he wants us to get this right. And we're not commanded to forgive for the other person's sake. It's primarily for our benefit, because it robs us of part of the abundant life that Jesus promised us in John 10:10. So when we fail to forgive, we somehow think that we're punishing that person. But what we do is we end up empowering the perpetrator, even if they're deceased, to impact us in a negative fashion. So we only get to live life in the present. We can't live in the past. So when we live in the past and hold grudges, we allow resentment and bitterness to fester like open sores. So it really is a spiritual battle. Um, and God has forgiven us, each of us. As my Christian faith teaches me that God has given us forgiveness. Well, it's easy to ask for forgiveness and receive it, but when it comes to offering forgiveness, that's a horse of a different color. We have sometimes have a little more difficulty with that, and I believe that's because many people have a lot of misconceptions as to what forgiveness is and isn't. I'd like to talk about some of the things that it's not. I think will help clear it up for some people. If you
Okay. Well, let's go into it.
All right. So forgiveness is not excusing the person. We don't minimize or explain away what they did, make excuses for it, and we say what we did, it didn't matter. What we do say is what they did was wrong. We don't excuse the person. So forgiveness is also not letting go of accountability. Someone might have broken the law. There might be legal consequences or repercussions for what they've done to us. So it's not letting go of the accountability. And it's not denying reality either. We may have to change the way we relate to that person if they fail to stop the abuse or the hurtful behavior. But we acknowledge reality. Forgiveness is not letting offenses reoccur again and again or becoming a doormat. All right. We don't tolerate abuse. That's not loving ourselves well. Forgiveness is not being a martyr. We shouldn't become doormats because we've forgiven someone. The behavior needs to stop. And it's also not based on other people's actions or attitudes. And this is a tough one. No one earns our forgiveness. We offer it unilaterally, regardless of what they do or fail to do. So a lot of people might feel like, well, I'll forgive them when they ask me to forgive. That's not a healthy approach to look at it. Regardless of what they do, they might even be deceased. It might be impossible to ask that person, talk to that person, but we can let it go and still forgive anyway. Forgiveness is not stuffing the hurt, because feelings buried alive never die, right? So we don't just stuff it. We don't just sweep it under the rug or pretend it never happened. No, we bring it up and we talk about it. Forgiveness is not believing time heals all wounds. That is not true. That's a fallacy. Wounds inflicted on us in childhood can linger for a lifetime. I can tell you, my wife and I have been doing marriage groups for the last 7 years. It would take about 9 months to go through this book called Intimate Encounters with about a dozen couples. And we see wounds that people received in childhood. Maybe they were 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, and they're still wrestling with it, and they're 50 now or 60, and they're still wrestling with these conclusions they made about the world and how to interact with others because of what happened to them when they were 12. It's so time does not heal all wounds. Forgiveness is not conditional. Conditional forgiveness is an oxymoron. We forgive even if they never repent or ask for it. Forgiveness is not a feeling. If we wait until we feel like forgiving, it'll likely never happen. We do it anyway because we know it's what's best for us. Forgiveness is not reconciling. You might be able to reconcile with that person, but you might not. That's not a precondition to forgiveness. We can provide forgiveness without expecting anything in return. Forgiveness is not forgetting. We don't have to forget what's been done to us, but we likely will remember. Forgiveness allows us to remember with more grace. When we forgive from the heart, we can recall the event without the pain. That's when we know we've forgiven. Another thing forgiveness is not, and it's not dependent upon the extent of our pain. We may feel that because our pain is so deep, it's okay to withhold forgiveness. That's another falsehood. So that's what forgiveness isn't. And I think, we can hold on to a lot of those things and it'll prevent us from moving forward. So forgiveness, what is it then? Well, it's a command. We talked about, it being in the Lord's Prayer and many other places in the Bible we're commanded to forgive. It's not a recommendation, it's a command. So it is yielding to God the right to take care of justice. So we don't want to take this matter into our own hands. We just we release them and we turn it over to God. Forgiveness is giving up on anger and allowing God to heal, repay, restore, convict, and love on us and love them as well by convicting them of their behavior. That's not our job. That's God's job. So forgiveness is also absorbing the cost of the debt ourselves, just as God did for us by dying on the cross. We absorb the cost of that debt. We don't make them pay for it. So, because forgiveness is really about not making them pay for what they've done. So we absorb the cost of that debt on ourselves. Forgiveness is refusing to extract restitution. The perpetrator, you may feel like they owe me, but no, we let that go. That's part of forgiveness. We simply let it go and we turn them over to God. Forgiveness is, and I'm saying God a lot, but some listeners might want to refer to God as, the higher power or the universe, or, most people believe that there is something outside of ourselves that's kind of running things. Doesn't have to be God for you, but there has to be an entity or a power that you can turn this stuff over to. Otherwise, I don't think your forgiveness is going to be as complete as it can be.
So I'd love to go back to two of the things that you said, because way back when you said, these there's a reason that we call these emotions toxic. And you said that the toxic emotions will ultimately poison us. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about what is your understanding of the physiology, because I feel like we've talked a lot, if we're talking spirit, mind, and body, we've talked a lot about how these toxic emotions affect our spiritual relationships with ourselves, how we allow these emotions to kind of bubble up when we're not intentionally releasing negativity and refilling with positivity. And you mentioned also that the toxic emotions will poison you, but the positive emotions, your words were, are undeniably beneficial for our physical health. So talk to us a little bit about, maybe I don't have a strong faith background and I'm like, Doc, just explain the science to me. Tell me how this works on a physiological level as well, because I think we all intuitively know that toxic emotions will poison us and that positivity is the only alternative to that. But what are the physiological benefits that we go through when we live positive lives?
That's a great question. And somebody listening really needs to understand that, or they're really not going to get what they can out of this episode. So we've got to understand there's a mind-body connection. And the simplest explanation would be this. I'm going to make a speech at work, and the boss is going to be there and a bunch of my higher ups. And this is an important speech. Well, it would be normal to experience sweaty palms before I get up on in front of those people, in front of that audience. So I have some emotions going on in my mind. Maybe some fear, maybe some anxiety, maybe some trepidation about how this is going to turn out. But it's manifesting in a physical symptoms. I have sweaty palms. So there's a mind-body connection there, and it's very, very powerful. And another one is, some people might say, well, Dave, I like this spirit, mind, bodies talk. It's good, but I prefer to stick with the science. Show me some science. Well, we have all kinds of science in the published literature when it comes to a pharmaceutical company trying to get a drug approved. They have to go through a clinical trial, and if they can't prove that their proposed drug is more effective than placebo, the FDA will not approve it. So about 30% of the time, about a third of the time, the people that in a clinical trial that receive a placebo actually experience the results that the drug is purported to elicit, but they go to sugar pill. So there's a strong mind-body connection. Rather than ignore it, I think we should explore it and dive deeper into it and understand it better. There's another really great study, a guy named Dr. Bruce Moseley. He's an arthroscopic knee surgeon. And he noticed that with his knee surgery, about a third of the time people experienced the desired outcome, but 2/3 of the time they didn't. So he said, well, that's pretty close to placebo. So he envisioned a really cool trial, and he did a clinical trial on this, where he gave some patients actual knee surgery, and he gave others sham knee surgery, where he went down there and he made an incision and he swished some water around and made it sound like he was doing something. All the while, the patient was watching a video of someone else's knee surgery. So after 2 years of follow-up, the people that got the sham knee surgery had just as much pain relief as the real surgery patients, and they had better flexibility. So the outcome was actually better for the placebo sham surgery patient than it was for the person who got the actual surgery. So there's a strong mind-body connection that cannot be ignored. So if we're experiencing toxic emotions like bitterness, resentment, and anger on a regular basis, and that's what unforgiveness will do to us, we experience an elevation in our stress response. So the autonomic nervous system has two sides. They kind of operate in a seesaw fashion. The sympathetic side is the fight or flight. So we're preparing to have the encounter with the lion. So our heart rate is up, our pupils get dilated, our alertness is heightened. That's all great if you're running from a lion, but it's not so great if you're living a normal life to have that constantly going on. So that slow drip of cortisol and adrenaline, those types of stress hormones, those other catecholamines, they're all pro-inflammatory. They will have a detrimental impact on our physiology. And it's well documented. It's absolutely scientific. The relationship cannot be denied.
It is so powerful to think about the fact that we do have a lot of control over our physiological processes by the way that we think and incorporate language and purpose and being and emotions into our everyday life. And so I'd like to talk more about the types of people that you work with, the people that you really like to help, because you are a naturopath, and that is a very different practice than traditional allopathic medicine. And what you try to teach people is that true health is this combination of body, mind, and spirit. Tell us, patient comes in to see you, they are telling you, I've been on this journey, maybe I've got diabetes, maybe I'm a little bit overweight, maybe I've got a little bit of depression or anxiety. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Many of us try to make health and wellness so complicated. Let's stop doing that and instead take control of our health with 5 simple steps. When you head to lindsayelmore.com/5pillars, that's lindsayelmore.com/5 and pillars, you will get 5 simple steps that help you to eliminate the crap from your environment, take ownership and control of your detoxification pathways, craft intentional relaxation, nourish your body, and exercise regularly. We'll take all of those steps and create one comprehensive plan that helps you to take control of your health. Head to lindsayelmore.com/5pillars now for your free downloadable. And now, let's get back to the show. What are your key concepts that you think anyone can implement, be they sick or be they not, that are going to help our listeners to live a healthier life? What are your go-tos when you first start working with someone who wants to be more well?
That's a great question. There's a lot there. There's a lot of layers to that, right? But we can start with how do I start out with a patient, or I call them clients. So when I had my health coaching practice, I did mostly nutritional counseling. And a lot of people got help. I saw hundreds of people, but I was making the same mistake back then that a lot of practitioners make. And that is, I called myself holistic, but I really didn't know what the term meant. So we are a spirit, we have a mind, and we live in a body. And this is an important concept for a new client to understand, that it's not just about the physical. Real quick story. I was living in Fort Lauderdale, Florida in the mid 80s. And I was a football fan. I was a Miami Dolphin fan. And at the time, the head coach was Don Shula and the quarterback was Dan Marino. And they had a show.
It was a good few years for Miami football. It was a good run, totally. Yes.
It was a lot of fun to watch,
Absolutely.
Was fantastic. I mean, I was in awe watching the way he could play. But I heard Coach Shula say on the Shula show one night, he said, when I first saw Dan Marino play, I said to myself, this guy's got the best arm I've ever seen. I'm going to build my team around his arm. And that's exactly what they did. They hired a couple of great wide receivers. They were the Mark brothers, Mark Clayton and Mark Duper. And they could score some points really fast. Dan Marino had the quick release. It was a beautiful thing to watch. But as good as Dan Marino was, probably one of the best 4-5 quarterbacks that ever played the game, he does not have a Super Bowl ring. The Dolphins never won a championship with Dan Marino. Why? Because although they had the passing game, they didn't have a defense and they didn't have an effective running game. And you can't win a championship without all three components operating in unison. The same is true with a human being. We need more than just the physical. We are a spirit, we have a mind, and we live in a body. And if you really want to address health effectively and build a championship vitality, you've got to address the whole person at the same time. So that's one of the big concepts that I like to share with people when they first come to me. When a person first comes to me, they've generally seen a couple of different doctors, and they're generally on a few different meds. And they'll say, hey, I'm tired of these side effects. I don't think the doctors really know what's wrong with me anyway. Can you give me a natural supplement that'll do what the drugs will do without the side effects? And better.
Good luck.
That is not possible. We cannot replace the drugs. Drugs are powerful, potentized substances, also potentially lethal in properly prescribed dosages.
Mm-hmm. Especially for children.
Yeah, and that's your field, and you know that much better than I do. But that's a concept I have to explain to people. It's like trying to use a supplement to replace a drug. I call that allopathic nutrition.
Yeah, I call it greenwashed pharmacy. Same concept.
Yeah, okay. Supplements are useful at times, but we need to remember they are just that, supplements. The foundation of your nutrition comes from food. All right. And then we talk about some more things, the mental, emotional, and spiritual, and how that all ties together. So that's how I would start off with a patient or a client. Of course, there's more.
Big question for you. Explain to us the difference between the spirit and the mind.
Great question. Love it. Yeah. You must have done some homework before this episode. I love these questions.
Thank you.
So 1 Thessalonians I think it's chapter 23, says this: may the God of peace himself sanctify you completely. May your whole body, soul, and spirit be kept blameless. Right. So I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, and I read and study the Bible. So that passage clearly tells us that there are three components to a human being. So I believe the spirit is the highest and most noble part of a human being, and is designed to be in submission to and connected to God. That's where our spirit functions well. And our spirit, of course, is eternal. It's going to live forever. And our minds are our thoughts, emotions, will. It's the inner dialogue we have with ourselves in our heads, as we go about our days. So that's our mind. And the Bible often refers to that as our soul. So, but we know there's a part of us that says, wait a minute, I have a thought here. I'm in control of this. So our minds are designed to be in submission to our spirits. So they're supposed to get their instructions from our spirits. And when they do, they'll send healthy instructions to our minds. So those thoughts that our minds produce send instructions to our brains, which is an organ. And the brains run the body. So there's the connection. You've got to understand this hierarchy. There's a great researcher. Her name is Dr. Dr. Caroline Leaf. She's been doing brain research for almost 40 years. And she says the psychiatric profession has this all backwards. Since they take the reductionist approach that human beings are just cells and tissue, they believe that the brain is what creates the thoughts. And if you're having poor thoughts, then you must have a chemical imbalance in your brain. So they try to correct that with pharmaceuticals. But according to Dr. Caroline Leaf, and I defer to her because she knows far more about this than I do, but she, multiple PhDs in this field. She says our brains don't create thoughts; they respond to them. So when our minds are operating right and connected to our spirit that's connected to God, they act as a bridge between the spirit and the body, and they send healthy instructions to the brains, therefore healthy instructions to the body. Computer programmers have a term called GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. So if you have a faulty program, you program this software with poor or bad information, it's going to produce undesirable results. Same is true with the spirit mind body relationship. It has to be working properly in order to get the best results.
That is absolutely fascinating, and it is so deep. I'm just going to say it again. We think in allopathic medicine that the brain creates the thoughts, but the mind creates the thought, and the brain is the response computer. So if you're getting garbage from your mind, which is getting garbage from your spiritual connection with God or with the universe or with the gorgeous leaf that's out there blowing in the breeze, whatever that spiritual connection and that universal connection is for you, if you're getting garbage from all of those things, it ultimately ends in the sweaty palms before you have to go and give a presentation. It is all so interconnected. I am curious, and I ask this question of a lot of guests. What gives you hope right now? I think that we've all been through such a stressful year. We all are still a little bit confused on what's going on. I was on your podcast, and I remember you and I were on the show. We were recording the show, and it was on January the 6th. And your wife called you and was like, "Hon, you got to turn on the news." And you and I both were like, "Do you watch the news?" And we were like, "No." And so it was a fascinating moment for me because there was a lot of strain in the world happening around us. And yet you and I just continued with what we were doing, and we both stayed calm about it. And we knew that we would have a moment at another time to process all of this stress, that we could have gotten diverted and gone in so many different directions. What, as you look out into the world as well as internally, what gives you great hope that we can become healthier and happier on every single level?
Great question. Well, there's a couple of things. One is I have a belief that tells me that I was created with a purpose in mind. And the Bible tells us that in John 10:10, I've come that you might have life and have it abundantly. So I believe that abundant life includes health and wellness. And I get a great deal of peace on holding on to that promise. And I believe that if we do things God's way, and you could call it nature's way if you want, that's fine. But when we cooperate with nature and cooperate with our design, things will tend to work out for us instead of working in opposition to it, which is what an allopathic practitioner does. That A in allopathic stands for opposed to or opposite of. So if you're asymptomatic, you have no symptoms. If you're an atheist, you're opposed to the study of theology or of the Bible. So allopathic practitioner is operating on a system that believes that they're going to treat the problem. They're going to work in opposition to your symptoms, and their treatment is designed to obliterate your symptoms. Well, I believe we're far better off coming alongside the body's natural processes, and by our divine design is health. Health is our default setting, and if we can encourage the body's natural processes, we can achieve optimal health. And even in our later years, I personally believe that we've become accustomed to thinking of our vitality like a flashlight. When the batteries are fresh, it's shining nice and bright, lights up the whole room, no problem. But slowly over time, those batteries get weaker and the light gets dimmer and dimmer and dimmer until you can barely see it. And one day it just dies and goes out. That's what we've been told our vitality is. I believe our vitality is designed more like a candle where you light it, it burns steady, and it continues to burn steady till the very end. You get a little tiny stub and it flickers a couple times and goes out. That's what our vitality should be like. I mean, we're all going to die one day, right? I mean, we can't stop the clock. We're all headed to the same place. So that kind of gives me, that's the other part, my other part of the answer to your question is what gives me hope is that God is in control of this. It's not me. It's not up to me to do something about what took place on January 6th in Washington, D.C. That's not my job. So I can turn those things over to an omnipotent creator and say, God, I'm going to turn this over to you. One of the things that's really blessed me over the last 12 months is, again, I got to go to John Eldredge. His ministry is called Ransomed Heart. And he has a book out called Get Your Life Back. And it's basically about unplugging from the matrix. And it's very consistent with the holistic health model. I don't even know if he knows that. I've never spoke to him about it. I have met him. But anyway, this book, Get Your Life Back, is about practicing things like soaking in beauty in nature, shutting your cell phone off for dinner, those kinds of things that are just, really basic, but man, they can go a long way. And he has a companion app. He calls it the Pause app. It's free. You can install it on your phone and you set the time of day that you want it to remind you. And it says, hey, time for a pause. And you can do a 1 minute, a 3 minute, and I think a 5 and a 10 minute. And I use the 1 minute pause for probably a good 6 months. And you listen to some relaxing music, do a little deep breathing, and you just say a phrase something like this: I give everything and everyone to you, God. Would you restore my connection with you? And even 60 seconds it's amazing how much more peaceful I feel after that. It took me 6 months to graduate to the 3 minute pause, which I do now. But that's how I handle it. That's how I answer that question.
But I love that because it doesn't have to be complicated and it doesn't have to take a ton of time to calm the monkey mind, create a greater inner awareness, create moments of gratitude. And I think so many people are prone to worry, and worry is also toxic, in my opinion. And I think that taking just 1 minute to say, you know what, I don't have to worry about that right now. And the more that I practice just saying, you know what, I am going to allow someone else to take that worry. I'm going to give that over to something bigger than me that maybe I can't explain, that maybe I've never even explored this relationship, and maybe it seems silly. But just pause and breathe for a minute and see how your life can change.
Well, it all boils down to we have control over our thoughts. We're not victims of our thoughts. We have 100% complete control over them. When we have couples come to our marriage group, most of them, I would say 8 or 9 out of 10, are there to get their spouse fixed.
Yeah, it's always somebody else's problems, right?
Exactly. That's human nature, right? We all do it. But we have to explain to the couples, look, you can't change them. The only thing you have complete control over is yourself and the way you approach these relational challenges and the thoughts that you allow into your brain. That's up to you. And the same is true here. We can reject stressful thoughts and we can embrace peaceful thoughts. And I call it turning it over to God. You can turn it over to nature. You can turn it over to the higher power. But as you said just a moment ago, the point is there needs to be a letting go. And that is going to be extraordinarily beneficial to your health.
Absolutely. Well, here's to that, to being able to let go. Dr. Sandstrom, it has been such an honor to talk to you today on the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Everyone, I had such a joy talking with David today, and he has been kind enough to offer you a free download. All that you have to do is head to www.davidsandstrom.com/Lindsay. There, you can get a free copy of the top 10 tips for healthy eating, as well as a free chapter on forgiveness from his book, The Christian's Guide to Holistic Health, and much, much more. Go and check it out, www.davidsandstrom.com/Lindsay, and grab your free download today. Hey there, listeners, it's Lindsay. Just wanted to let you know that I, alongside some of my favorite functional medicine pharmacists, will be teaching a stress solution summit on May the 15th. This is a course to help you reduce stress and heal your hormones. By the time you finish the course, you will have practical tips and useful knowledge that will help you reduce stress in your daily life, include movement throughout the day without it feeling like exercise, and understand how stress is disrupting your blood sugar, your thyroid hormones, and your sex hormones, leading to all kinds of problems, from mood swings to messy menopause to metabolic disease. I hope that you'll join me on May the 15th. All you have to do to get signed up is head to lindsayelmore.com/stress solution. All you have to do right now is head to www.lindsayelmore.com/stress solution. The Lindsay Elmore Show is written and produced by me, Lindsay Elmore. Show segments are produced by Sue Procco and Kelsey Lorman. Production design, sound design, and editing is by Jive Media. If you have a question about this or any other episode of the podcast, send us an email to hello@lindsayelmoreshow.com. And hey, since you're still here, take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And while you're at it, go over and follow us on Instagram @Lindsay Elmore Show. This helps us bring the pod to more people.